What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I wanted to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the overall market thus far as we had important pieces of earnings, not to mention some big data that came out that's affecting the way the market's moving, and what you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I break anything down, all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks, which are fractions of the Magnificent 7, and the offer ends very soon in just a couple of weeks. Anyways, for the market right here, I want to break down how things are looking. Looking at SPY, I do see a possible head and shoulders as something that could be forming on the chart. And I do want to note that there is going to likely be downside coming over the next couple of weeks. If you give SPY just a few weeks, we will likely see that move down that I called out. However, for now, market has been attempting to rebound just temporarily, and there could be an attempt to go a little higher before we end up getting the turn. So I want to break down some very important levels, what you should be watching for, where SPY could potentially reject, and how things are looking in my personal opinion. But first, let's talk about some data real quick. As a reminder, today is Thursday, May 2nd, 2024. We just got initial jobless claims. This is at 208,000. This is very close to expectations, a little bit on the lower end. And continuing jobless claims is also very close to expectations, a little bit on the lower end too, but not too bad. And then, excuse me, with that coming out, we're seeing a little bit of contractions in the labor market. But just like what Jerome Powell said yesterday, based off the data, things are not necessarily like crashing or tanking just yet. He also mentioned that there are important things that we have to be monitoring, especially for inflationary data. And the Fed is still very uncertain about things. He is concerned about inflation being hot, at least for the shorter term. So that's something worth noting. And I think that that's a very good point. We have to be very, very mindful of that. Anyways, later on for today, at 11:30 a.m., we have the 4-week and 8-week bill auctions coming out. So look for volatility at that time. And then for tomorrow, look at the unemployment rate and other pieces of data like that. But that's all we're kind of seeing for today. Just initial jobs claims in the morning. Then we have mainly just bill auctions at 11:30 a.m. Everything else is kind of minor, if anything. As far as the market ended up moving, we got a nice little pump and dump like movie yesterday. I attempted to break down, and we didn't really manage to hold our levels. And we got some bearish looking technicals as a result of that. With Jerome Powell, I know that a lot of people are saying that he was so dovish and this and that. I personally think that he did say some dovish things. I'm going to admit that about economic stagflation, about the economy still being strong. However, let me make it very, very clear that he also said some things that are a little bit more hawkish, and I think it's very important to note them. I actually have some quotes right here. Basically, the Fed did not raise rates. Powell sent a warning about how sticky prices are. He said inflation is too high, and further progression and bringing it down is not assured. The path forward is uncertainty. So he's trying to make it clear that the Fed is uncertain about inflation. Short-term projections are still hot, and the Fed has work to do. So I want to make that very clear. There's no sign of a cut truly just yet. Okay, and we have to be very mindful of this. So make sure you guys are prepared for this. I know he's trying to say that inflation will eventually go down, but for the shorter term, we're not as certain. And that's one of the issues, at least for the markets. We're not as certain, at least for the short term. And he did warn of keeping rates higher for longer. Google laid off at least 200 employees from its core team. That's some news that came out. Consumers may be cutting back on spending. There's been a lot of talk about that, at least amongst economists. And that is something that's very important. For earnings, we just had Peloton and Moderna. After the market closes, we have Aapl and Coinbase, so get ready for that. Peloton did not have the best of earnings, but they are trying to refinance their debt, which is good news for them. They're laying off 15% of their staff. And you can see in terms of earnings, they missed on EPS. Their loss was 45 cents versus a loss of 37 cents expected. Missed on revenue at 718 million. But despite that, with them refinancing their debt and also looking at improved margins, that has been improving things at least somewhat for them. So that's what we're seeing, at least for their full year guidance. I wouldn't say a big improvement. It's kind of like closer to expectations. But their earnings are not the best. But since they're starting to like refinance their debt, and they also talked about their CEO stepping down, the share price is still holding up quite well. Moderna is also not doing as great. You can see right over here, their loss per share is $3.07. Revenue is 167 million. That's above expectations, but their loss overall wasn't as bad. So decent earnings overall, but guidance was so for them. So I would say that they're kind of flat right now in the after hours, not making any crazy moves. There's been more talk about Tesla basically revoking some of their insurance because once again, The company is not in a great position to hire them. And it's very sad to hear about that, but it is what it is. So the question is, what's going on with SPY? So we have our 50 EMA's resistance at 504. If that breaks, look at 505.7 as next resistance. That's going to be very close to this mid 505 area. If we break that, look at this potential right shoulder at 507, and then eventually 510 is resistance. For support, watch 502. If we lose that, look at 500. If that fails, there's 497 and eventually 493 coming. What do I see on the charts? There's a possible head and shoulders developing right here. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually either pop a little bit more and then eventually reject, or even if we reject here, so that is a big risk on SPY. However, if we were to break past 510, then we could get a temporary rally just a little bit higher before the move to the downside comes. But I'm pretty confident there's going to be a move to the downside coming eventually, guys. I think the market is going to see a correction because of the fact that, firstly, after what Jerome Powell said about rates being held higher for longer, yields are going up again. We're actually seeing the 10-year Treasury yield climbing. It's up over 1%. Could even climb a little bit higher. That tends to be a bit more bearish for the markets. Dollar is up a little bit, but the VIX is kind of flat, so we'll just have to wait and see. And on top of that, don't forget about the fact that cyclicals and the shift in treasuries is going to affect the markets. So I personally think that there's going to be a bigger sell-off coming in the future over the next 4 weeks. But for the short term, SPY is an attempt to kind of rally a little bit. It's trying to push right here. So we will see how high this goes. Do we stop right here at 504? Do we go up to 505.5? Or do we form like a right shoulder? There's a possible head and shoulders, so just be mindful of this. And we'll see how high SPY goes. Excuse me. Just for a few more, Tesla is trying to turn. I did say yesterday Tesla in the market could try to rebound a bit before we see a sell-off. Tesla could go all the way up to 186, maybe even 188, a little bit higher before we try to turn. There is this gap to fill down here. I do think Tesla will fill this gap and retest 178 in the future, but look for a little push up first before we continue to 178 and eventually these lower levels. For Nvda, we're at resistance at 850. If we break through this, look for 862. If we reject off, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 824. So I anticipate that Nvidia is going to likely get a rejection off 850. We'll have to wait and see if we get this rejection from here, or if we temporarily break above this before we get the rejection. But I do think that there's going to be a rejection coming, so just be mindful of that. For the QQQ, it's kind of struggling to break past this resistance for this trend line. Is also the 50 EMA. Just like SPY, there's a head and shoulders like structure. If we reject here, we're going to be sinking all the way down to 420 or below that. If we break through this, look for 428 or 430 before we end up coming down. Just be careful, guys. There is, some potential in the market to slow down. We want to be very mindful of this. And also on Aapl, I just want to call out that Aapl is kind of flat right now. We have 172.5 as resistance and 174. We have support at 171 and 170. We might shuffle a bit in this 172 to 171 area, and then we have earnings coming out, which is going to determine what the bigger move is. With that being said, guys, that's it for the video. I want to make this one kind of quick. Market opens in a few minutes, so get ready. And just know the market could pump a little bit, but there's a possible head and shoulders forming on SPY and the QQQ, and we'll see how things go from here. Thank you for listening, guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you, and peace out.